Well, church family, it's been a long time since we've been together. On the one hand, it seems like there's been a lot going on. On the other hand, it seems like nothing's been going on. I can't wait until we're able to be back together again in a normal setting. But at the same time, at least we had some good news this week, and that is that we're going to be getting back to a modified service format beginning June the 7th. If somehow you missed that announcement, I would encourage you to go onto the website and look up the information and get up to date on what's going on. I trust that you've been listening to the wonderful series that Pastor Tyler's been giving over this period of time with the theme of overwhelmed and how God speaks to us during seasons like this. His practical, biblically based presentation has been wonderful, and it should be viewed over and over again. In light of what we've been going through over the past several weeks, I've been asked as a professional counselor and as one who believes that the Word of God is the solution to the problems that we have, to give a presentation on the issue of isolation and the subject of depression, which some of you may be going through. I know that we are nearing the end of this period of total isolation, and there are things that we haven't been able to do that we're now going to be able to do. I know that some of you I'm going to be getting a haircut on Tuesday, so that's really an important thing for me. I feel like I've almost got a mullet going, and that just isn't who I am anyway. Yet at the same time, as we look at this situation, we realize that it has forever changed us. Now, some of those changes are positive, and next Wednesday what I'll be doing is going through a list of things, both for our church and for many of us as individuals, of things that have been positive that have come out of this coronavirus period. But this study is focused on the issue of depression and is intended as a counselor's perspective, as an augmentation to the series Overwhelmed that the pastor has been presenting. So far in the pastor's series, he has covered Matthew 6, do not worry, but trust. Psalm 131, do not fret, but hope. Philippians 4, do not be anxious, but pray. And Habakkuk 3, do not lose heart, but worship. And he will be presenting sessions over the next 2 Sundays as he concludes this series. The issue of depression is sometimes very controversial within Christian circles. There are some people who feel that depression is sin, while there are others, most of whom have already been through a season of depression, who understand that the issue is very complicated. Many people don't understand that the issue of depression falls into 2 categories. And the first of these categories is called clinical depression. Clinical depression is a condition that needs to be diagnosed by a physician. And it may not be caused by the circumstances that an individual is in. Neither can it be something that the individual can solve in and of their own will. Contrary to what some in the Christian community believe, clinical depression is not always caused by sin. This type of depression can be caused by a physical disorder that needs to be treated by a doctor. Of course, God is able. He's still the great physician. He can still heal people, and he can still bring about what we would call miracles. But sometimes seeing a doctor for depression is no different than going to see a doctor with a broken arm or an upset stomach. We all learned in school that our genetic makeup directs biochemical events that influence our growth, what we look like, our behavior, and our moods. When operating properly, our nervous system has natural checks and balances. But when this doesn't operate properly, doctors sometimes have to give medication. History has given us many creative artists, composers, and writers who have lived with depression, including Walt Whitman, Samuel Clemens, and Ernest Hemingway. Many people do not know that Charles Spurgeon was the Prince of Preachers, partially because he was also the Prince of Pain. From the time he was 15 until he passed away in 1892, Spurgeon was never fully liberated from what he called the giant despair. The second category of depression is what we call situational depression. Situational depression, as stated in its label, is the depression that is based upon an individual in a particular situation. We may all be somewhat familiar with that in terms of what we've been through. There are times, I'm sure, when each of us has experienced a period of melancholy, a flash of melancholy, a short period in which we have felt the type of emotions tied to depression in the past few months. We can find many examples in the Bible where certain people experienced situational depression. Moses in Numbers 11, 10 through 16, David in Psalm 51 and Psalm 32, 1 through 5, King Saul in 1 Samuel chapters 16 to 20, Elijah in 1 Kings 19, 1 to 18, and of course Job, Jonah in Jonah 4, 1 through 11, and throughout the Psalms. In fact, the entire book of Lamentations is a poetic expression of the Hebrews' deep, deep depression after the fall of Jerusalem with no hope of redemption or rescue. A key element to situational depression is that those individuals experiencing it are particularly normal when they are not in the circumstances that cause them to be depressed. The reaction that they are having is one that is based upon their perceptions of the situation and how they respond to those perceptions. Now, other individuals may be in the same circumstances and find that they have no issues. We can see these differences in this chart. We see at the top that both of these individuals are in the same situation. Now, depressed individuals view that situation as being permanent. They have statements in their mind, going through their mind, like, I'll never get over this. Their thoughts are also global. Everything is horrible. And they are internal. They're focused towards self. I must have done something wrong for this to happen to me. And the result is depression. Now, coping individuals, or we might just call these normal individuals, view such situations as temporary. Their statement would be something like, this is a hard time, but I will get through it. They are also very specific. This is just one thing, but there are still a lot of good things going on. And they are also external. Everybody goes through things like this. It will end. And the result is that they cope successfully. So where do we go from here? Martin Seligman, a secular psychologist, after completing a landmark study for Consumer Reports, stated the following: depression is increasingly common in our culture because of an epidemic of hopelessness stemming from the rise of individualism and the decline of a commitment to religion and family. Now, it is interesting that a secular research psychologist notes the correlation between the incidence of depression and the lessening of a commitment to religion and family. While this study does not establish a cause and effect, it at least establishes a connection between what we believe and how we react to whatever circumstances that we find ourselves in. The Bible makes it clear that God doesn't remove us from the normal circumstances of life. Matthew 5:45 says, "He causes the sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous." But we know certain things as Christians that can and should impact our thoughts, no matter the circumstances we find ourselves in. We know from Deuteronomy 31:6 that God is with us and will never leave us. Second, we know that the battle we read about in Ephesians 6:10 and following is a battle for our thought life, for how we think about our circumstances. It is indeed raging full force during trying times, and we need to be prepared. Third, we know from John 8:44 that Satan is a liar, and he uses our vulnerabilities during difficult times to tempt us and turn our thoughts from those of a coping individual to those of a depressed individual. And finally, we know from the temptation of Christ and Hebrews 4:12 the power of the Word of God to cut through to the deep thoughts we have in difficult times, to defeat Satan, and to get our thoughts back to rightful thinking. Now, I know that there are some out there who are saying, "Doc, why are we having all of this talk about depression? The last 2 months have been absolutely fantastic. I've been to Lowe's every day, and I've been able to get projects done that I haven't been able to get done for years. And the time I've been able to spend with my family has been fantastic. I wouldn't trade the last few months for anything." But I also know at the same time that there are others with whom this discussion really resonates. To the first group, I'd say, good. And maybe you've learned some things about the priorities in your life. Maybe you can take the things that you've been able to do during this period of time and use them to reset your priorities and find ways to spend more time with your family or find time to get the projects done that you need to get done. But to the second group, I'd say, God is still in control. The battle is still raging. Victory is available, but only through knowing, claiming, and applying the Word of God. And finally, our church has counseling resources which are available for those who need to deal with issues like depression. For the past few years, I, as an elder, have been doing counseling. But in addition to that, our pastoral staff are all well-trained and have many years of experience in doing counseling. If you'd like to talk to me, or if you'd like to talk to one of the pastoral staff, or perhaps one of the other elders, then I'd recommend that you contact the church office and they can set that up for you. And I'd also like to make available to you a collection of verses that I have that I believe all Christians need to memorize in order to be prepared for situations such as those that we have been through. All that you need to do there is phone the church, let them know that you want a copy of them, and I'll send them out to you in kind of a business card size collection that you can put a rubber band around. Men, you can stick it in your pocket. Women, you can stick it in your purse. You can take it with you. And whenever you have a few minutes, you can take them out and go through them. And before long, you'll find that you've been able to hide these truths in your heart. Finally, church family, I ask God's blessing on all of you. Keep safe, and I look forward to the time when we can be back together again. Thank you.